The summer wind came dry from the south, carrying the smell of mesquite smoke and dust. Since the raid, the camp had moved higher into the foothills, where the scrub grew thick and the soldiers were slower to follow. Elias Boone spent his days mending fences, checking horses, keeping his head down. The people tolerated him now. They no longer spat in the dirt when he passed, though some still turned away. It was enough. He woke that morning to the sound of Nantan sharpening a knife on a whetstone just outside the hut. The scrape carried through the still air. Elias sat up, reached for his hat, and stepped out into the sun. "Chief wants meat," Nantan said, without looking up. Elias nodded. "Guess I'll wash first. Wash later." The blade hissed once more along the stone. He wait now. They walked through camp together in uneasy silence. Women ground maize near the fires. Children chased each other between the shelters. Life had returned to a kind of rhythm, though the memory of smoke and gunfire still hung between them. Chief Taza Redbird sat near the edge of camp, a low mesa rising behind him like a wall. Aiyana knelt beside him, spreading a map drawn on deerskin. She looked up when they approached, her eyes catching Elias's for an instant before she turned back to her father. "Soldiers move south again," Taza said. "But there is another trouble. Settlers near the river. They bring trade and greed." Aiyana pointed to a small mark on the map. "They ask for horses, corn, anything they can carry, but they also ask questions about a white man among us." Taza's gaze fixed on Elias. "You know this land. You speak their tongue. You go with Nantan. See if they mean peace or trouble." Nantan's jaw tightened. "Why him?" "Because he walks between fires," Taza said. "Sometimes only smoke can speak to smoke." Elias gave a slow nod. "I'll go." That afternoon they rode out, two men from opposite worlds, their shadows long against the red rock. The trail wound through dry washes and mesquite thickets until the smell of cattle reached them. Below, near the river, stood a rough trading post. One shack, a few wagons, smoke curling from a tin chimney. Nantan dismounted first. "You talk. I watch." Elias led the horses closer. A man stepped out of the shack, broad-shouldered, red beard, a Colt on his hip. "Well, I'll be," he said. "A blue-coat ghost. Ain't seen you since San Carlos." Elias's gut went cold. Ben Cutter, former quartermaster turned trader. He'd known him during his army days. "Not a ghost," Elias said evenly. "Just looking to trade." Cutter's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing. Word's out there's a deserter hiding with the Apaches. Army's paying good for names." Before Elias could answer, Nantan appeared behind him, silent as a shadow. Cutter's hand twitched toward his gun, but Nantan's stare stopped him cold. Elias forced a smile. "Ain't here for bounties. Just salt and flour." Cutter spat in the dust. "Salt's worth more'n your hide. Take what you need and get." They loaded 2 sacks without another word. When they rode off, Elias felt Cutter's eyes burning between his shoulders until the shack disappeared behind a bend. Nantan broke the silence first. "He know you." "Used to. He'll tell the army. Then soldiers come. Maybe not right away." By the time they reached the ridge above camp, the sun was sinking. Smoke from the cook fires rose in thin blue threads. Below, Aiyana moved among the horses, braiding her mount's mane. Nantan reined in. "You bring danger again." Elias looked down at the camp, the people who had started to trust him. "Seems danger's been following me a long time." Nantan studied him, then nodded once.
We see what kind of man you are when it catches up." He turned his horse and rode ahead. Elias watched him go, then looked west where the light was fading. He didn't know which fire would reach him first, the one behind or the one ahead, but he knew there'd be no place left to hide. He tightened the reins and started down toward the camp, the smell of smoke thick in the evening air.
By dawn, the wind had shifted north, cooler, but carrying the scent of rain and iron. The horses stamped uneasily in the corral, and Elias Boone felt the same restlessness in his bones. Chief Taza had given him and Nantan one task: take 5 horses to a ranch near the edge of the valley and return with flour and salt. Simple on paper, but no road in Arizona stayed simple for long. They rode out at first light. Aiyana Redbird stood at the edge of camp, shawl pulled tight against the wind. She didn't speak, only gave Elias a small nod that told him everything she couldn't say. For an hour they rode in silence. The trail cut through dry gulches and stands of ocotillo, the sun climbing slow behind a veil of clouds. Nantan rode ahead, back straight, rifle balanced across his saddle. Elias followed, feeling the ache in his side with each step of the horse. "You don't talk much," Elias said finally. "Nothing worth saying," Nantan replied without turning. "You speak plenty for both." Elias grinned. "Guess that's true." The grin faded when they reached the narrow valley where the trading ranch sat. A small corral, 2 buildings, smoke from a cook fire. 3 men worked near the fence, their clothes too clean for cowhands. One looked up, and even from a distance, Elias saw recognition spark in his eyes. "Keep your guard up," Elias murmured. "Those ain't ranchers." They dismounted slowly, leading the horses toward the gate. The tallest man, a broad-shouldered drifter with a scar down his cheek, met them halfway. "Fine animals," the man said. "Where'd you get 'em?" "Trade from the mountains," Elias answered. "Chief Taza Redbird sends his word." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny. We heard a deserter's riding with the Apache. Goes by the name Boone." Elias felt Nantan tense beside him. He kept his voice level. "You hear wrong." The drifter's hand dropped to his hip. Maybe not." The shot came quick. Nantan's rifle cracked before the man could clear leather. The drifter's hat spun off his head as he dove for cover. Gunfire exploded from the corral. Elias pulled his revolver and fired twice, driving another man back behind a barrel. "Get to the horses!" he shouted. Nantan fired again, covering Elias as they scrambled into the saddle. The third man ran for the door, shouting something about the bounty. Elias kicked his horse hard, the animal surging forward through the gate. Bullets slapped the dirt around him, sharp and flat. Then they were in open country again, wind tearing at their hats, the ranch shrinking behind them. They didn't slow until the ridges swallowed the trail. Both men swung down in a wash thick with mesquite, lungs burning. Nantan checked his rifle, then looked at Elias. "You bring trouble like thunder." Elias laughed once, breathless. "You shot first." "He draw." "He was thinking about it." Nantan gave a half smile, his first. "Now you think like us." They watered the horses, waited for the heat to fade, and started back toward camp. The silence between them wasn't hostile anymore. It was the quiet of men who had stood on the same line and lived to cross it. When they reached the ridge above camp, the sky had gone red and purple with sunset. Aiyana was waiting, eyes searching the horizon, until she saw them ride in.
"You found trouble," she said when they rode in. "Didn't have to look far." Elias answered. She looked from him to Nantan. "You fought together?" Nantan swung down and tied his reins. "He fought well, maybe better than he runs." Elias met his glance, half a smile on both of their faces now. Taza stepped out from his shelter, listening to the report in silence. When they finished, he said only, "Tomorrow we move again. Soldiers too close." As the camp settled into night, Aiyana brought Elias a bowl of stew. "You bleed again?" she asked quietly. "Just the same old scars. Scars tell story. Some better left untold." She held his gaze a moment longer, then set the bowl beside him. Then let the silence tell it. The firelight flickered between them. Outside, coyotes called from the ridges, voices threading through the dark like ghosts of the land. Elias listened, thinking how easily enemies could turn into allies, and how the line between both was thinner than the desert wind.
The nights grew colder as autumn crept over the desert. The stars came earlier, sharper, like flakes of ice scattered across the black. Elias Boone lay awake more often now, listening to the faint stir of horses and the breath of a camp that had learned to live by moving before sunrise. That evening, Aiyana Redbird had told him a story about spirits that followed men who carried guilt. "They walk in your shadow," she said. "When you rest, they whisper." He had smiled, saying he didn't believe in ghosts, but her words stayed with him anyway. 2 days later, a scout came racing back to camp. "Soldiers," he said in Apache, panting, "riding north of the canyon." A boy, no more than 12, had been taken gathering firewood. His name was Kai, the youngest nephew of Nantan. When Chief Taza called for volunteers to find him, Elias didn't wait to be asked. "If the soldiers are near, I can move among them easier than you can." Nantan's glare told him the offer wasn't welcome, but Aiyana's slight nod decided it. At dusk they rode out, Elias, Nantan, and Aiyana following the narrow trail that wound toward the dry river canyon. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke and horse sweat. By full dark, they saw the campfire glow below, tucked in a wash beside the trail. 6 soldiers, 1 officer, and the boy bound near a wagon. Captain Silas Drew sat by the fire, polishing his boots. The years hadn't softened him. His voice carried clear. "We'll take the brat to Fort Lowell at first light. Maybe he tells us where the others hide." Elias crouched in the scrub above the wash, heart hammering. He knew that voice, commanding, humorless, a sound from another life. He motioned for Nantan to circle left, Aiyana right. The plan was simple: draw their eyes, grab the boy, vanish into the dark. When the wind rose and rattled the brush, Elias moved. He slid down the slope, knife in hand, to cut the rope around the boy's wrists. Kai's eyes went wide, but he stayed silent. Elias lifted him, one hand over the boy's mouth, and turned toward the shadows. Then a boot crunched behind him. "Boone?" Drew's voice froze him in place. "I'll be damned." Elias spun, shoving the boy toward the dark where Aiyana waited. Drew's revolver flashed. The bullet tore through Elias's sleeve. Before the captain could fire again, Nantan's arrow thudded into the ground at his feet, followed by another that nicked his arm. Chaos, shouts, horses rearing,
Gunfire split the night. Elias grabbed a fallen rifle and fired once, hitting a lantern. Flames leapt up, blinding the soldiers, long enough for Aiyana to pull Kai into the brush. He followed, half running, half stumbling, the sound of Drew's curses echoing behind them. They didn't stop until the campfire glow was no more than a flicker on the horizon. Kai clung to Aiyana's waist, sobbing quietly. Nanton appeared from the shadows, bleeding from a cut on his cheek. "You bring them close now," he said to Elias. "Captain knows your name." Elias nodded, still catching his breath. He knew it already. Aiyana looked from one man to the other. "Then we move before dawn." By the time they reached the ridgeline above their own camp, the eastern sky was paling. The boy was safe, but the cost sat heavy. Elias stared down at his torn sleeve and the faint smear of blood across his arm. "You saved him," Aiyana said softly. "Maybe, but Drew won't stop now." She touched the sleeve just above the wound. "Then you keep running?" Elias looked at her, the first hint of a smile ghosting his face. "Not this time." When the sun broke over the mesas, their shadows stretched long behind them, thin and restless, like the ghosts she'd spoken of, walking a step behind in the new light.
By the next week, the wind had turned mean and dry, carrying dust through every crack in the shelters. At dawn, Aiyana Redbird found the first sign of sickness, a child burning with fever, his skin pale and slick with sweat. By midday, 3 more had fallen ill. The camp's steady rhythm broke. Elias Boone helped where he could, hauling water, keeping fires low to fight the heat. He watched Aiyana move from one shelter to the next, mixing herbs and whispering prayers. Her calm kept people from panic, but he could see the worry behind her eyes. When Chief Taza gathered the elders that night, the verdict was grim. "The medicine roots are gone," he said. "The traders at the settlement have more, but the soldiers ride the same road." Elias looked across the circle. "I can get through," he said. Nanton's head snapped up. "You go, they hang you. You bring soldiers down on us again." "I've worn that uniform," Elias said quietly. "I know how to walk past it." Aiyana shook her head. "Too dangerous. So sitting here watching kids die." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Taza nodded once. "Go before sunrise. Bring what you can." He rode alone through the night, following the dry riverbed until faint lanterns marked the edge of Tres Mulas, a rough sprawl of tents and adobe shacks that served miners and soldiers alike. The air smelled of whiskey and sweat. He tied his horse behind a stable and pulled his hat low. Inside the trading post, the keeper blinked at him through the lamplight. "You look like you've seen better days." "Just need medicine," Elias said. "Fever root, if you got it." The man hesitated. "The army's buying up all the stock. You one of them?" Elias set 3 silver coins on the counter. "Do I look like one?" He got the bundle and was almost out the door when the clatter of boots stopped him. 2 soldiers pushed in, rain-dark coats, rifles slung casual but ready. One of them grinned. "Well, I'll be," the taller one said. "Captain Drew said you'd come sniffing around." Elias didn't wait. He slammed the door into the man's chest and dove for the alley, shots echoing off adobe walls. He sprinted for the horse, swung up and kicked hard. Shouts followed, another shot, then the night swallowed him. By the time he reached the canyon, the moon was up, and his arm bled from a grazing bullet. The campfires looked like a necklace of dull stars scattered across the sand. Aiyana ran to meet him as he dismounted, breathless. "You did it?" she asked.
He handed her the bundle. Got enough for a week. Her eyes went to the blood on his sleeve. You're hurt. Not bad. She tore a strip from her shawl and pressed it to the wound. You think pain makes you strong. Maybe it only makes you tired. He met her gaze. Tired's still alive. She smiled faintly, then turned to the waiting mothers, calling instructions in Apache. Elias sat down by the fire, too spent to move. The flames blurred as exhaustion took him. He woke at dawn to quiet. The sick were sleeping. The fever had broken in most. Aiyana sat beside him, dark circles under her eyes. They live, she said simply. Elias nodded, staring at the light edging the hills. Guess we both do. Nantan came up behind them, folding his arms. You brought medicine. You bring soldiers too? Not yet, Elias said. Nantan studied him a long moment, then nodded. Maybe this time they follow other ghosts. As he walked away, Aiyana looked at Elias. You always give more than you keep. He smiled wearily. Ain't much worth keeping but what you give. The wind shifted again, cool now, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled. A promise, not a threat.
By late September, the sky had turned white with heat again, and the mesquite cracked like old bone. For a few precious days, the fever stayed down, the horses fattened, and the tribe found a kind of uneasy calm. But Elias Boone knew calm on the frontier never lasted. The first sign came with the dust. 3 riders appeared on the horizon one evening, tiny shapes in the glare. Nantan climbed the ridge, spyglass in hand, and came down grim-faced. Scouts, he said. Army men. Captain Drew's colors. The news ran through camp like wind through dry grass. Chief Taza called for everyone to prepare to move before dawn. Aiyana packed herbs and blankets. The children helped drive the horses down to the arroyo. Elias tried to stay busy, but the weight in his gut only grew heavier. That night, while the fires burned low, he found Aiyana by the water jars. You can still get out easy, she said without looking up. Go west, find your own land. And leave you to clean up what I started? He asked. She straightened, the lamplight turning her eyes to amber. You didn't start it, the soldiers did, but you'll die if you stay. He smiled without humor. Maybe I finally owe somebody that much. Before she could answer, Nantan strode up. Taza wants you, now. The chief sat outside his hut, maps and gear spread before him. He looked older in the firelight, the lines on his face cut deep. The army closes fast, he said. We take the high trail north at sunrise, but if they find our tracks, they follow. Elias understood before Taza said it. You want me to lead them away? He nodded. They chase you, we live. Nantan bristled. He cannot go alone. I've been running alone half my life. I know the shape of it. Taza reached out, clasped his forearm. You walk one path, we another. If the wind favors you, we meet again. Aiyana stepped out of the shadows, holding a strip of red cloth. For luck, she said softly, tying it around his wrist. Or memory. He looked at her hand against his skin, then at her face. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Before dawn, Elias saddled his mare and rode east. Behind him, the camp began to move, a whisper of hooves and canvas fading into the hills. The desert ahead stretched wide and empty, gold light bleeding into the sky. By mid-morning, he saw the scouts, a dust cloud growing thicker on the horizon. He let them see him, let the sun flash on his rifle barrel. Then he turned south, straight into open country. They followed, as he knew they would. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. His canteen ran dry, but he didn't look back. When the shots came,
Wild, far-off cracks, he ducked into a narrow canyon, doubling back through the rocks until the echoes swallowed everything. By nightfall, he reached the ridge above the dry lake bed. The wind was cool, the stars wide and merciless. Below, he could see faint firelight, the army's camp, just a handful of sparks against the dark. He took off his hat, pressed the red cloth into its band, and set it on a rock. Then he whispered a few words to the wind, not prayer, not curse, just something to mark the line he'd drawn again. When he finally turned north, the fires were already dying behind him. He rode slow, the mare's hooves soft in the dust, and somewhere beyond the ridges, he thought he heard a woman's voice carried on the wind, calling his name.
The desert smelled of rain again when Elias Boone found the trail of the tribe. 2 days of riding north through scrub and dry creek beds had left him hollow, but the smoke rising from a distant mesa told him he'd guessed right. He reined in, took a long pull from his last bit of water, and let the mare walk slow. When he reached the camp, the light was gold and soft. The people moved like ghosts through the evening chores, cooking fires low, voices quiet. Nantan was the first to see him. He said nothing, only lifted a hand for the guards to lower their rifles. Elias slid off the horse. "You made it," he said. Nantan nodded. "You still alive?" "Mostly." They walked together through the camp. Children watched him pass without fear now. Aiyana stood near the corral, her shawl pulled tight, face turned to the sunset. She didn't move until he stopped beside her. "You came back," she said. "Had to see how the story ended." "It doesn't end. It changes shape." He smiled a little. "You sound like your father. He says the land keeps what we leave behind, even our mistakes." They stood in silence until Chief Taza Redbird approached. He looked tired but satisfied. "The soldiers turned south. They chased ghosts in the sand." I nodded. "That's what I meant them to find." Taza studied him a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You walk with 2 hearts, Boone. That is hard road. I've been walking it a while." The chief turned away to check the herd, leaving them alone. The camp's sounds rose softly. The crack of firewood, a child laughing somewhere near the horses. It felt like peace, at least for a while. Aiyana looked at the red cloth still tied to his wrist, now sun-faded and frayed. "You kept it." "Guess I did." "Then you keep part of us." I wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Instead, he took her hand, rough and warm, and pressed it once before letting go. When night came, he sat outside the hut they'd given him, listening to the coyotes. The stars were bright again, sharp against the dark. Nantan joined him, dropping to a crouch. "Tomorrow we move east. New ground, new water." I nodded. "You'll do fine." "You come?" "Not this time. There's work west, ranchers who need a hand, fences to mend." Nantan studied him, then offered his hand. "You were stranger, now not stranger." I shook it, the simple gesture saying more than words ever could. Before dawn, he saddled the mare again. The camp slept, except for one figure standing by the fire. Aiyana, her hair loose, the flames painting her face in gold and shadow. "You'll find peace?" she asked. "I'll try. Then the road won't feel so long." I tipped my hat, turned the horse toward the pale line of morning, and rode out. The hoofbeats faded into the hush between night and day. Behind him,
Aiyana watched until the dust settled, then lifted her eyes to the first light breaking over the hills. Somewhere out there, she knew, he'd draw another line in the dust and start again. The sun climbed, spilling over the desert, and for a heartbeat, the land looked new.